Hello, what's up? So today we're gonna do a discussion on women talking as well as faith and organized religion in general, based on how it was depicted or discussed in the film. So I just before we get into that, I just want to say that I really wanted this to be the first video that I do this year in 2023. However, the reason I was not able to do that is because I've had health issues, which literally prevented me from being able to talk. But now that my situation is getting better, I am now able to talk. And of course, I want to do a discussion on women talking. So this film is written and directed by Sarah Polley, based on the novel by Miriam Taves, which is about an isolated Mennonite community where women have been repeatedly assaulted by the men in the colony by using cow tranquilizers to them. But something happens, and then some of the men were brought to prison. And while the men of the colony are gone, the women must decide their fate if they would do nothing, stay and fight, or leave. So to those that are triggered by the discussion of sexual assault and rape, I would like to say that I think it was already been discussed by other film critics, but they're not really shown in the film. So I hope it's less triggering. Well, of course, the discussion is still there. And that is the core of this film. It's women discussing what's the right thing to do after everything they have gone through. And these are generations of women. So this stars Rooney Mara, Claire Foy, Jessie Buckley, Judith Ivey, Ben Whishaw, Frances McDormand, Sheila McCarthy, Michelle McLeod, and many. So, coming into 2022, this is one of the most anticipated films that I've had just because of Sarah Polley, who I've seen her work in Away From Her and Take This Waltz and Stories We Tell. And I just think she's one of the most exciting filmmakers that we have right now. And I am surprised to know that this is actually like her comeback after like almost, I don't know, almost a decade of not working as a director in film. So this was exciting. The subject matter is really exciting to me to see be done in film. Not the sexual assault, but the discussion of it, and within the context of faith and organized religion. That's always interesting to me. In 2015, my favorite film of the year is Spotlight, which is also about like sexual assault and organized religion. I really just that those two topics are very close to my heart. So coming into this film, I have an expectation, as I think everyone has when they know about a film and they get into it. I was expecting really a chamber piece that like trapped you and made you feel suffocated for good. I love those kinds of films where they just entrap you in location and let the discussion be the flow of the conversation. If anyone has seen my thesis film, half of my film is set in one room. So I really have a thing for that. But we got here, Sarah Polley's vision of the story is much more expansive, much more, in some ways also kind of poetic, because it tries to weave scenes with it. Good morning. If you hear the roosters, it's morning while I'm recording this. Weave the context of the outside world of the colony and the people inside the barn. And the people inside the barn are having these big conversations within a small space. But visually, we are also being transported to what's at stake with the small confined conversation that they're having. We are talking about a place that they have known all their lives. We are talking about the people that they have known. We are talking about the young boys that will become the men of the colony. They will talk about the environment that they have really known. And their world has been this small. I mean, outside of the barn, their world is small because they've been inside that colony for most of their life. And I'm glad that Sarah Polley took that paradox of like confined space, expansive vision. Sometimes when I watch a film, I unconsciously wear my filmmaker hat, but this one, I just had to trust her vision of it. It took me a while to get into it, but once I got the rhythm, the visual style, the rhythm, the flow, the pace, then I was invested in it. And what really helped is, number one, Hildur Guðnadóttir's score is evocative of the strong but conflicted emotions that they are going through. These people have survived sexual assault, but yet it takes them a very long time to decide if they are gonna leave or not. That decision making, because there are things that would make them want to stay. And also the conflict of, like, they have the problem of the men in the colony, and is staying in that place damaging to their faith. But if they leave, they would be condemned. They would forfeit their place in heaven. So that's what the organized religion is telling them. So that's what Marike said, the character of Jessie Buckley. Like, well, if we're gonna fight the men, we will be forced to forgive the men who raped us in the first place, and the reason why they fought. So that's a big conflict. And what else? The editing is so sharp in making sure that the points of these women are pointed, and yet there is space for them to breathe, rhythmically speaking. So that's by Christopher Donaldson and Roslyn Kalu. I know Christopher Donaldson because I think he has done editing for The Handmaid's Tale, also a TV series about organized religion and sexual assault. But I think I have to circle back to the writing by Sarah Polley, going hand in hand in the direction. It's so beautifully written. It gets that the language of the believer, this specific kind of faith, and how it is so transgressive and yet so natural to feel that these women that have been silenced for the longest time start articulating their thoughts and faith. And sometimes they struggle, but they really have the words for it, and they know what they want to say. They just, because for the longest time they've been silenced, like baby steps, but they know what they want. Their goal is clear. Just the struggle is how to get there. It's so beautifully written. For some people who thinks it sounds so written, I know some people who liked the writing of the film, says that that's the point, that it is stylized. Actually, for me, I grew up surrounded with people who kind of talks like this, who really talk about their faith and their religiosity, throwing big terms, like conversationally, and I really appreciated that, and that was really beautifully done. And of course the cast. What a strong cast. I would be hard pressed to think of any better cast this year. Like Rooney Mara and her wide-eyed hopefulness and optimism. Claire Foy's motherly rage and fury that is, I think, I would stay with me for a very long time. Jessie Buckley's push and pull of her abrasiveness, and how that really is a shield or like a layer to how she deals with that assault, of just being that kind of environment. Judith Ivey with her instinct to really just try to connect people, and like she's been a believer for the longest time. Like she gives her the longevity that in her faith, and yet she also struggles with it. Sheila McCarthy in her, like, I don't know, sometimes she has regrets with how she probably brought up Marike and how she dealt with the situation. Ben Whishaw is extremely touching as the man who is doing the minutes of the meeting. It's a beautiful performance that crushed me by the end. Frances McDormand is strong in a very brief role. She comes in and out of the film, and that's yeah. And the others, Michelle McLeod as McNeil, Kate Hallett as Otcha, Liv McNeil as Nietzsche, and the others, August Winter as Melvin. It's a really strong cast, and I really could not think of anything better. This is one of the best acting of the year. Okay, so one thing that a lot of people have gripe on with this film is the color grading. First of all, great cinematography by Luc Montpellier. With the color grading, I understand what they were going for. I don't necessarily agree with the strategy, but it's not something that I would take against the film in such a major way that it would destroy the film. No. I've had encounters with, films that, have employed a strategy. Not for me, but I understand what you're doing. But for me now, what I really value, and not just with this film, but with films in general, is I want to see a choice being made. I don't want to see a film that, it's working, but it's on autopilot. Or like there's not really a distinctive choice that's been made. I would rather see a film that made a choice that maybe didn't work for me, but I saw that there is a decisiveness in that vision. And for that, okay, I'm indifferent about it. But yeah, so this film has one of the most, is what is perhaps the most powerful experience that I have watching a film this year. The last 10 to 30 minutes are some of the most gripping things I've ever seen, with the final scene leaving me into tears. This is a hopeful rumination on faith and the role that women have in faith and organized religion. How does one deal with faith? It's a very, very powerful film. I know that it's a tough sell for other people, but I hope people take the chance in watching this film because it is really beautifully crafted. So, I don't know. It felt like I felt like my life was richer after I watched this film. So I'm really happy that I got to see this. So now let's talk about the one that I discussed, which is the topic of the organized religion in this film and how it was tackled. I really appreciated this film, and this film really cut deep for me because on how truthful it got, that aspect. I would not expound on my personal experience per se, but it's just so interesting to see it depicted on in film. So number one, I think the biggest aspect here is the misogyny within within the organized religion. This is a self-proclaimed Christian religion, and here we see how men really dominate the faith and how it really really goes from what is in the text to how they actually treat the women, and it speaks to the patriarchal nature of Christianity, for example, and how that could breed misogyny. And in the case of the film, since they are men, and that automatically makes the women less in general in the film, and in organized religion. And when I speak of organized religion, I'm just going to speak of Christianity from here on. It is in the text of the Bible, for example, that women are beneath men, and men are under women are under men are under Christ. So there's really this subjugation, a gender-based subjugation, like women should be silent in the church, and women should submit themselves to their husbands, so and many other things. So it's really embedded in the text, in the religious text. And in the case of the film, it was able to show that. But what's really interesting here is that the women are genuinely faithful, and they have, in their own way, negotiated their space with understanding that. But there's also a lot of internalized misogyny that they would have to deal with, or in the case, they understood what's going on, and they just that's the nature. So that's why the aspect of leaving, the prospect of leaving, I mean, is so revolutionary, because they are true believers, and they are good students. Like the women have been good students as well. It has also been discussed in the film. Good students of what? Good students of gender roles discussed. Good students of what they think they can do or what they cannot do. That indoctrination of what a person is or should be is so strong. And true believers are good students, unfortunately. And it also shows, like, for example, in how women, like, religion that is led by men could be so stringent on how they enforce laws on women. Like, you cannot do this, you cannot do that. You should not wear makeup. You should only wear long clothing, modest clothing. You should not provoke men, because if men commit sins, it's your fault, because you have made the men adulterers in their eyes. I could quote Bible verses, but I won't. So that aspect really struck me, because I've seen that, and I've seen how how faith has been so gendered, and how it is common in the language. When people talk within circles of people that are faithful, the sexism is strong, and how that trickles down from throwaway lines that, why are you wearing that? Why are you not wearing modest clothing? Do you want to be raped? To actual rape. You see how misogyny goes into a full circle because of how how people have decided that men are above women. It really trickles down. It's not isolated. It's not just locker room talk. It's not just that. It is potent. Words are potent. And what's in the text, the religious text, has real life implications. And, that kind of language really has effect. So I'm glad that they were able to show that. And, I have been passionate about women directors, and it's because it's a different worldview. Because if the text that we are so exposed to is just written by men, for men, and it's this saying that men dominate just by nature, it's frustrating. It's frustrating. So anyway, so yeah, I have had experiences with just seeing up close, like, how faith, organized religion could really be misogynistic. But I have also seen how people within that organized religion, women, who have been really true believers, and they just accept the role and accept that because that's the part of their faith, and how conflicting it is sometimes to free themselves, and they won't free themselves, like, don't even wear makeup. And women should not be leaders. Yeah, so they would rather vote for a corrupt man than a woman with no corruption issues whatsoever for president. Oh yeah, and also women should not work. Women should just stay at home. That kind of thing. So anyway, another thing that has been discussed here is the trauma and mental health of these characters. They really have several manifestations of how they deal with sexual assault. Salome has this rage because her daughter was also assaulted. Marieke has become hard to talk to because of just, I think there is it's a way of survival. McNeil has anxiety attacks. They all have flashes of what happened to them. And it's really important that they started discussing it, because even Marieke kind of questioned, like, why does McNeil have anxiety attacks when we all have been assaulted? That is true of what I've seen in organized religion, how people really dismiss mental health. Really dismiss it. Last August, I was diagnosed with anxiety and depression. And this is the first time I think I'm really saying it out loud on the record, because, when you're in an organized religion, they would say that, well, depression is not for Christians. When you're depressed, it means you have a weak faith, or you're doing something wrong. You're committing a sin. You should not take antidepressants, because when you take antidepressants, you're not trusting God. Christians don't get depressed. You just have to pray on it. Like, really, mental health is being sidelined through the organized religion that I've seen, because they don't think of mental health issues as real issues the same way that physical health issues are. And I'm glad that there is a texture here in the film where they were discussing that how are these women dealing with it and how they differ in dealing with it, because there's also in general a misconception that trauma is one size fit all. It's not, and it's so refreshing to see it in film. Also, two things that come together is, number one, in organized religion, there's one of its strong tenet is obedience. Like, you really just have to obey, just have faith. If you don't understand everything, just obey still, because, we're in the right and, we're not doing anything wrong. But that cultivates a lack of critical thinking. I've seen people follow their leaders just because they said so. And I am glad that in Women Talking, women who have been disregarded as lower than men, here they're given a platform to think about their future. They use their critical thinking. Because I don't think that's a lot. I've seen that a lot. I think I've seen a lot of, once in my life, just follow. He knows better than you do. You're not the leader. You're not the one chosen by God to be the leader. How would you know any better? Are you going against the faith? Why are you saying some things that, like, critical thinking is not really fostered in organized religion, unfortunately. I would love to hear people contradict and say, well, actually, in my religion, it's not the case. That's not what I'm seeing. And then the other one, there is a strong holding on to authority and lack of accountability in turn. Lack of accountability because that's where forgiveness comes in. And this is the line in the film where they said the forgiveness is being misconstrued as permission. And unfortunately, I think a lot of organized religion, they have to forgive in order to be able to stay or before they get ostracized. And I think Ona in the film says that, well, when you have to forgive, is that even true forgiveness? Shouldn't forgiveness really come from within, from the person who wants to forgive? And there's a lack of accountability because sometimes he would say, oh, he was just tempted by Satan, deceived by Satan. Oh, well, he raped someone. Well, that's because you're a child. Why did you leave your child with that person? Instead of like, well, why did he rape a child? A lot are being swept under the rug for the sake of the Christian bond, for the sake of forgiveness, for the sake of, well, if you're not going to forgive, God would not forgive you. And if God would not forgive you, you're not going to be able to enter heaven. So that's where accountability falls off, because everything gets swept under forgiveness. But that's where also it comes in. Inconsistency. Because there will be some people who would do something and that would cause them to be expelled or excommunicated. And some would be like, well, forgive 7 times, 77 times. The inconsistency as shown in the film, when women do this is what happens. What if men does this, this is what happens. It is within the contradictions of faith in organized religion that really strikes a chord with me and how it's shown in the film. Because, I've seen parts of this film in my own life. But to see it be talked about on screen, for me, it felt like a taboo. Like, oh, finally it's being discussed. And it's so refreshing and it's so empowering that we get to discuss faith and religion with objectivity. Because I think when people talk about faith and religion, it's usually either with just pure ridicule or reverence to it. I think we could talk about it with respect, but also be really critical about how it's being handled and how things are going on in it. So another thing that I would like to discuss then now is, because that thing about being swept under the rug, the things that are swept under the rug, the inconsistency, the hypocrisy, it's all for the sake of forgiveness. It's also all for the sake of community. and since it's organized religion, there's a strong sense of community that can be good. Because when you're an organized religion, specifically an isolated one or a minority one, you would really have to have a great support system to be able to keep going. And the bond that is being shared, especially when people are true believers, it can be really sustaining. It can be really comforting to have that. And I think everyone needs some support system one way or the other. The bad thing though is sometimes because an action has been done, and instead of accountability being instead of someone being held accountable, for the sake of that community, for the sake of the church, for the sake of the peace of everyone, how to sweep that under the rug, and that cultivates an unsafe space for the believers, because then who gets to decide which ones are forgivable, which ones are not? And in the film, it's exacerbated, It has fostered a culture of repeated sexual violence towards the women. I believe, when the gender roles are much clearer, the discrimination is also stronger. And in the case of organized religion, in the film and in the one that I'm talking about, it's clear which sex is more favored. And that is disheartening to see. One thing that also I would like to mention is the idea of suffering. Scarface Jans, the ones played by Francis McDormand, said we should just do nothing and forgive the men, because if we don't forgive the men, we will forfeit our place in heaven. And Rooney Mara says something about surely there's something worth living for in this life, not just the after or the next. Suffering is one of the prime things discussed in the New Testament, and unfortunately, I think there are some believers that have a masochistic tendency that the more they suffer, the more that they are great believers. I would concede that there is suffering in this life. And if you really try to strive to become a true faithful, you would let go of some things. You would not do some things. Even that would mean deprive of your carnal desires, if that's the right word. But it's frustrating when people just I don't know. Some people like to suffer even things that they could correct, or even things that they could do something about, and they would not suffer about it anymore. It's so frustrating. I have experienced that firsthand in my life. It's so dumb. I don't know. I think it makes them feel that they're better Christians. And I believe what Ona says, that there must be things that are worth living for in this life, not just the next. Because if that's the case, then why are we living this life? One of the strongest discussions in the film is staying versus leaving. Staying because they would have to adhere to the group that they have believed in for the soul of the colony, or leaving. And for the case of Salome, she said, I will become a murderer if I stay. So Judith Ivey's character, I forgot her name, she said then, pacifism, Agatha. If it will turn you into a murderer, then for the sake of your soul, of your faith, then the best choice is leaving. And that's where I think a great clash between faith and organized religion. Sometimes organized religion is the one causing people to lose their faith. I have had friends who have that. So in organized religion, staying is the most important part. You stay. No matter what, you stay for your faith. But here, they show that leaving, I will quote, leaving is a supreme act of faith. You're leaving because you don't want to do that anymore. Leaving because you don't want to experience that anymore. Leaving because giving you distance would allow you to actually genuinely forgive the people. Instead of, you would forgive and then they would assault you again. So that's, are you really going to be able to forgive the people that are doing it repeatedly? So that is a very worthy discussion. I think it's empowering for, especially for people that are, I don't know, trying to seek or find faith without the confines of organized religion, because the organized religions that they have experience of, have been in, have not really helped them have a safe space for them to practice their faith, or at least observe it. So that is a great discussion that the film has shown. Really, I'm talking about a lot of things because they really talk about these things, or at least have these as textures in the discussions that we've had in the film. And lastly, the idea of faith, because they were saying stay and fight, do nothing, or leave. Is faith something debilitating or empowering? If faith would not allow them to have if the religion that they have would not allow them to really practice their faith, to practice the tenets of their faith, pacifism, Salome really has struggled with that. Forgiveness, could they really forgive the men that are just with them, assaulting them, where there's a culture of violence towards women? Is it really faith if it stops them from believing, or it gives them a hard time believing? And ultimately, they made a choice where faith is empowering. Their genuine faith would free them from the shackles of the gendered man-made religion that they adhere to, but it would allow them to be able to really practice their faith. Because even in the hardest times, they would recite verses in the Bible. They would sing hymns. And that is a manifestation that these women believe. But would they really be able to continue believing genuinely and with so much love and faith if they are continuously subjected to the violence of these men, the men that are the ones in authority of their faith? That is what they grapple with, and I'm glad that the film really took a long time discussing it. And in terms of the men, especially with the character of August, played by Ben Whishaw, men have a role to play. The role that men have to that have to play is to let women talk, listen, take notes, and change what has to be changed for the better, and help that change be enacted. Many organized religions are patriarchal and misogynistic in general, and sexist, where they don't really listen to women, but they give decrees to women. It's time to listen to women. Allow them to talk. Allow them to have that space. And for us who probably are a little bit progressive in life, that's like a no-brainer. But believe me, trust me, there are people in 2023, some are even women, who think that women are weaker than men. They should not be given any roles that would need them to lead or speak. Women should stay silent. Women should always obey. We should always just obey. I know I've been kind of rambling, so that's not really a great thing, but I just really appreciate where this film went in terms of a discussion of faith, because I think this film is an act of practicing one's faith. Just watching it, but really thinking about it and what impact it has on you. So yeah, if you're still listening, thank you so much for sticking around. But really, this film really means a lot to me. Personally, it's the most important film of the year. And I'm talking for me personally. It has helped me, watch this in a time where I really needed some guidance. I am at a crossroads. I am lost. This film gave me some vision towards the future. So thank you so much to Sarah Polley and the whole cast and crew of this film. Thank you so much. And I really value this film. I hope more people watch this film. And so thank you so much. If you like this video, please give this a thumbs up, hit the subscribe button, hit the bell button, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.